Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you today. Now, I've been talking a lot about covered call ETFs and dividends, and I've talked a lot on this channel about side hustles and passive income. But it really led me to reflect on really what you should primarily focus on, which is the ultimate side hustle, which is your main hustle, which would be your job or your career, and how to enhance your earnings during your career. So, going along with the theme of this channel, the core theme of this channel, what I'm going to talk about today can really have life changing impact. And it's really important to follow this closely, I think, and understand everything in this video because throughout your career, you should look at your career earnings like as a whole. You should think about, the typical 40-year working career, which I know most, if not all of us, are aiming towards not working that long, but we do have to at least consider it. So, at least for purposes of uh, this example, hopefully we can all retire well before then, but we should, like I say, at least for this example, consider this. So, I've outlined four different scenarios that I'm going to talk about. Um, Different pathways that you're going to see, like where simple decisions come into play that can make a dramatic difference in your life. So, and this is where it comes in, where basically most of us as millennials and Gen Z, or that are millennials and Gen Z, we commonly switch jobs. Like some of us switch every 3 to 5 years, more commonly 3 years. But what's most important is that you never really want to stay in a stagnant career doing the same thing forever. Now, there's still, if you're really good with money, you can still be successful that way. But you're going to see the bottom line. If you think about what you earn over the course of your whole career, you should earn at least it could easily be a couple million, 1 million to 3 million, possibly, if you add up, or even at least 500,000 to 1 million. If you add up your lifetime earnings, which they kind of calculate for you on the Social Security site, if you check that, that's something we can discuss down the road too. But it's so important. I feel like in life, we as people, it's important not to stay stagnant. It's important to always try to be moving ahead and looking to enhance the bottom line, so to speak. And the thing is, because I was thinking everything I talk about on here, investing, dividends, and all that, none of it's really possible unless you have some money to begin with, right? And how do you get money to begin with unless you've inherited it or something, or unless you somehow obtained it through other means? You have to work to get it, right? And that's most of us. So the first scenario I'm going to go through, I have four scenarios, like I said, and each one has before and after inflation. And to make the example really interesting, I'm just assuming 8% inflation because, especially those of us that are Gen Z and millennials, we should assume the way our government prints money, we should assume future inflation is going to be a lot higher than it has been historically. And that's more and more, I'm thinking that myself. So just to really make it interesting and spice it up, I added 8% inflation every year. Now, it probably won't be that, but it's a good idea when preparing for stuff to think, kind of prepare yourself as best as possible. In some ways, preparing for, like, worst case scenario. That way, when it's not that bad, you're well ahead of the game. I'd rather err on that side than the other way. But anyway, so the first example in this spreadsheet, and like I said, a lot of numbers here. We're going to go through them all. Uh, Columns A and B assume like an average or median salary, 50,000 a year. I know that may not be everybody, but I'm just taking this as kind of a generic, template example, saying 50,000 a year. So this example is probably unrealistic because this assumes that over 40 years you never get a single dime in raises and you make the same amount of money. So every year in inflation, you're going to lose like 4,000 right off the bat, assuming 8% inflation. See, it's 0.92 when you're discounting. It's like you, instead of doing the 1.04 for 4% or whatever, or 1.08, you're discounting. So you do the 0.92 to factor out because it's a lesser value than one. But anyway, this is not a class on that. So this one is really very basic. just 50,000 a year forever. And believe it or not, with just making this, you'll make like $2 million throughout your career. And after inflation, you lose like 200,000. I'm not going to scroll to the bottom because I would give the rest of the numbers away. But then scenario number two, and now these first two scenarios are assuming minimal to average education. The first scenario probably assumes like no college at all. The second scenario may assume like a associate's degree or community college, and then the third scenario probably assumes like an undergrad degree or a dual major. Fourth scenario assumes probably a master's degree or higher, plus constantly enhancing skills, going to different courses, things like that, possibly being in a higher paying field, of course, not just the education. But the second scenario assumes you're getting average minimal raises of 3% a year in perpetuity for 40 years. So you can see the first 5 years, or the first, actually, the first half of your career, you can see where you would be. You would eventually hit six figures just getting, the 3% raises every year. But then, assuming that you went to college, got an undergrad degree, and you're probably starting in a better field. Hopefully, you picked a decent field that is going to pay a fairly decent salary. This example assumes you start at like 75,000, and then of course factors out the 8% inflation as well. But it also assumes you're going to average 5% raises throughout your career. And with this, you're going to see a big difference right up front because already you're starting out 25,000 higher than the other two examples, and then getting 5% raises on top of it, which I confess I don't even get at this point. So this makes me a little envious. Not envious because I'm not that way. When I see somebody more successful than me, I want to emulate them. I don't hate them. I want to emulate them, and that's kind of how I wish everybody could be. Because that's good. You want to strive to when you see an example or you see somebody, that how you want to be. You want to strive to be that way. Anyway, um, so yeah, this assumes 5% per year, and you can see how quick these earnings go up. And this, like I say, this is getting not just having an undergrad, but having more skills, more education, and getting a fairly decent average raise throughout your career. And then the last scenario, this one assumes that after you've gotten your undergrad, and in all these scenarios, you're probably starting out in your career at like age 22 or so. Um, this assumes that, and like I said, it assumes you're starting out at maybe age 22 and you're going to work at least 40 years. Some may be longer, some may be, all of us hopefully maybe less than that because that's our goal, right? The fire movement. But anyway, so this last example, I have the person starting at 80,000 a year. They're probably starting out maybe in a technical field or more skilled field, financial services, IT, payment systems, payments technology, or investment banking or something like that, which you really should start out higher for some of that, but just assuming 80,000. And then this assumes a 5% raise every year. But this is my favorite example because this assumes that by the time you're like in your late 20s, this assumes that you switch jobs, which is something you're going to repeat several times throughout your career. And this assumes, and this is why this is my favorite example, because this assumes every time you switch jobs, you get a big bump in pay, like 20% every time you switch. And then on top of that 20%, then you're getting decent raises on top of that are continuing. So then in this example, see you jump up by 20% to 100, almost 117,000 by the time you're in your late 20s, which is awesome for late 20s. And then this one assumes by the time you get into your early 30s, you get tired of what you were doing before. Not so much tired of what you were doing, but you see that you can job churn. It's another, I've talked about credit card churning, checking account churning. There's all kinds of churns that go on in life. Well, job churning is another one. So this assumes you're going to job churn again for the second time in your career. And this may seem a little ludicrous, but there are people that do this, trust me. Not saying you may be here by your mid 30s. So I probably could have come up with a more realistic one, but just follow along just for illustrative purposes here. So assuming that by the second job churn, you've gotten another 20% bump, and you could be like in a mid-level management role at this point, because this assumes you're really good at what you do. And not only are you churning, but you're making big leaps in promotions or titles as you go. So then by the time you're in your mid 30s, you're getting 5% raises from here. And then what happens? By the time you approach 40, you say, you know what? I want a job churn again because it's so much fun. And my last two slots or roles at the casino produced really good results. So I'm going to do it again and succeed again. And then say you get another big bump. Now you're in like upper mid-level management where you could be like, an executive director or something like that. And then now at this point, for this example, the raises slow down because you're already at a very high salary. So the raises start to slow down to 3% a year. And then you're going to get tired of those slow raise increases. And then you're going to do your fourth job churn of your career to where you're now at almost 300,000 a year. And then from there again, oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm actually wrong. So no more job churns after three. Three is the charm. So after this, I need to unbold this because there's no more job churns after this. So you're going to be locked in once you hit 250,000, assuming a normal market raise or just a normal cost of living adjustment of 3% from here on. You're going to end your career. Actually, I'm sorry. You're going to go probably for 10 years at this job, and then you're going to go out with a blaze of glory, and you're going to say, one more time, we're going to try the job churn one more time before we retire. And then you're going to land a 10% bump in pay. And then you're going to somehow, get 5% from then on. And that'll be the last time you do that during your career. But you're going to see it paid off very well because you're going to see where you end up here in just a second. So, assuming 5% a year, and you're not going to job churn again. So, I'm going to take this out. I'm going to unbold this and try to follow along here. I know there's a lot of numbers, but assuming in a 40-year career, you're going to end at like 700,000. So you're going to be probably in the finance world as an upper level managing director, getting tremendous bonuses and probably stock options and things like that. So you could be like an executive VP at this point. So this is 40 years of work, job churning, getting master's degrees. And what I left out, what I omitted that I probably should have said, is that by the time, say, you're in your 40s or mid 40s or 50s, you're going to get your doctorate degree. So then look at the difference here. Example one, 2 million. Inflation takes a huge chunk out of that. So you're at 1.84 million career earnings. Example two, you almost doubled your career earnings over the course of your career just by getting minimal raises. But inflation, as you see, still takes a huge chunk out of that, over 300,000. And then in scenario three, where you have at least your undergrad degree and you're getting decent raises throughout your career, look at that. Your earnings were $9 million throughout your career. And then factoring out inflation, you lost about 700,000. So that's like a lifetime tax. And when you think about the compound interest effect and all of that, it's huge. And then in the final example, now you're going to notice the compound effect between here and here, even though you're averaging 5% here, you're only 3.5 million higher for your career in this example. But some of these scenarios, like I say, may seem kind of outlandish, but trust me, there are people that do this. And I think this is what, we should all strive towards. You want to be, if you're, kind of a competitive person, kind of driven in life, you want to try to be at the top of your, income bracket, so to speak, like for your age group. And by the time you get into your 40s and 50s, even some cases in your 30s, those are like peak earning years. So it's important, like I say, because I talk so much on this channel about side hustles, passive income, dividends, make all this huge money with dividends and stuff like that. But, I thought it's a bit disingenuous to talk about that without talking about this because the main hustle to get all that money to begin with is the money that's going to come from your job. And hopefully you take some value from this video and see the huge effect, huge life-changing effect that it has to constantly keep increasing your skills, possibly increasing your education and job churning, which is very common, like I say, for Gen Z and millennials especially. So you see from example one to example four, it's over a $10 million difference in lifetime earnings. That is incredible. So And that's really important. So I really hope that you take away these key points from that. And if you like that, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks so much for tuning in. And keep an eye out for my next video. Take care.